The first time I heard the key turn in my bedroom door, I thought Mom was just being protective again. She'd always been that way, cautious, anxious, convinced the world was full of invisible dangers. But as the years went by, that small click at night stopped sounding like love and started feeling like prison bars sliding shut. That night was colder than usual. The wind outside was howling through the trees, and I could hear the pipes groaning in the walls. I was half asleep when I heard it. The slow creak of the hallway floorboards, the faint shuffle of her slippers. I didn't move. I'd learned not to. The key scraped softly against the lock, then turned with that familiar metallic sound that made my stomach twist. Click. My room was sealed again. I opened my eyes to the orange glow of the nightlight by my bed. The wallpaper was peeling in the corners, the ceiling cracked above me. Every little detail etched into my brain from years of staring at them night after night, waiting for morning. "Mom?" I whispered, even though I knew she wouldn't answer. There was only silence, broken by the faint hum of the refrigerator 2 rooms away. When I was a kid, I used to think she locked me in because she loved me, because she wanted to keep me safe. That's what she always said. The world is full of bad people, baby. You're safest when Mommy knows exactly where you are. But as I got older, things started to change. The locks got heavier. The explanations got stranger. Sometimes I'd wake up and see her standing in the hallway through the gap under my door, her bare feet visible in the strip of light. Just standing there, not moving. For hours. Once, when I was 10, I asked her why she did it. She smiled and stroked my hair. "Because something tries to come in at night," she said softly, "and Mommy's the only one keeping it out." At that age, I believed her. At 14, I didn't. The house had grown old and tired by then. The paint yellowed, the air always smelled faintly of mildew, and the silence stretched like a living thing between us. She didn't let me go to school anymore, said people were dangerous, that they didn't understand. I'd spend days locked in my room, doing lessons from old books, listening to her talk to herself downstairs. But I swear sometimes she wasn't talking to herself. I'd hear her whispering softly in the kitchen, low and rhythmic like a prayer. Then a pause. Then another voice. It wasn't her. It was deeper, slower, like it was coming from inside the walls. The night everything changed, I remember the smell first, something sour and metallic seeping through the vents. It woke me up. I sat up, heart pounding. Then came the scratching, faint at first, like a mouse trapped behind the drywall. But it grew louder, angrier, scraping closer to the headboard of my bed. I called out, "Mom!" Her footsteps came quickly down the hallway, faster than I'd ever heard her move before. The light outside my door flickered, and then her voice, sharp and breathless. "Don't talk to it." I froze. "What?" "Don't answer, it listens." The scratching stopped. I could hear her breathing outside, short and shallow. The silence stretched until I could hear my heartbeat echo in my ears. Then something else. A slow tap, tap, tap against the wall behind me, like long nails dragging across the plaster. I pressed my back against the opposite wall, trembling. "Mom, what is it?" Her voice cracked when she answered. "It's why your door stays locked. It's why your father left. Please don't open it." I didn't sleep that night. I just stared at the door until morning. When she brought breakfast through the small slot she'd cut at the bottom of it, she didn't meet my eyes. She looked pale, shaking, whispering something under her breath as she slid the plate through. I caught only 2 words: not safe. That afternoon, I pressed my ear to the wall where the scratching had been. At first, I heard nothing. Then, faintly, a voice, a whisper. My name. It sounded exactly like hers. When I pulled away, the paint was cracked in a perfect circle the size of a handprint, as though something had been pressing from the other side. That night, she locked my door earlier than usual. I heard her pacing outside, whispering to herself again. But around midnight, her voice changed. It wasn't her anymore. It was wrong, slurred, like someone trying to sound like her. Then a whisper from the wall, closer this time. She's lying to you. I pressed my palms over my ears. Stop it! The next thing I remember is her screaming. A deep, guttural scream from the hallway, raw and terrified. The lights flickered and then... silence. I didn't hear her again for 2 days. When I finally woke to footsteps, I called her name. No answer. Just the creak of the doorknob. The lock turned slowly, and the door opened a few inches. I saw her face in the gap, or what I thought was her face. It was too pale, the skin stretched too tight, eyes too wide. "Mom?" I whispered. She smiled. Her voice was calm. "It's safe now, baby. You can come out." But something in me, something deep, said no. I shut the door and locked it myself. The next morning, the food slot was empty. The house was silent. I pushed a note under the door asking if she was okay. A few minutes later, it slid back, written in her handwriting. "Don't worry, sweetheart, Mommy's keeping you safe. You're not the one I'm locking in." That was 3 days ago. The scratching is back, only this time it's coming from both sides of the wall. The light outside my door flickers every night at exactly 3:12 a.m. And last night it's when I heard her voice again, only it wasn't coming from the hallway. It was whispering right behind the wall, and it wasn't calling my name, it was laughing. I remember the day my mother called me like it had been rehearsed in some cruel dream. Her voice on the other end of the line was soft and trembling, almost broken, the way it had been when I was a child, and she wanted to make me feel guilty. "Danny," she said, "it's been too long, sweetheart. I made your favorite dinner, roast chicken and mashed potatoes. Will you come home tonight?" Home. I hadn't called that house home in years, but there was something in her tone, a mixture of sweetness and sadness, that made it impossible to say no. She sounded fragile, lonely. Maybe she really was trying to change. Maybe time had mellowed her into something softer. So against my better judgment, I said yes. When I pulled up to the old house on Brookshire Lane, the sight of it made my stomach tighten. The place looked exactly the same. The same leaning fence, the same faded green shutters, the same porch light that flickered in the wind like it was alive. The air smelled of damp leaves and old smoke, that strange nostalgic smell of my childhood, but sour now, rotten around the edges. When she opened the door for a moment, I almost didn't recognize her. She'd grown thinner, paler. Her eyes were ringed with sleepless purple shadows. But when she smiled, it was the same as it had always been. Too wide, stretched just a little too far. "Danny," she said, her voice cracking, "you came." She threw her arms around me and the hug was tighter than it should have been. When she finally let go, I noticed her hands, dry, trembling, nails cracked and yellowed. Inside, the air was thick and stale. Every light in the house was on, but somehow it still felt dark. Dust coated everything except the dining table. That was spotless. Polished silverware gleamed under the flickering chandelier. There were 3 plates. Not 2, 3. "Expecting company?" I asked, trying to sound casual even though a cold ripple crawled up my spine. She smiled faintly as she set down a bowl of mashed potatoes. "Of course. she said. Your sister wouldn't miss dinner for the world. The fork slipped from my fingers and clattered onto the plate. Mom, Sarah's gone. Her hands froze. The smile stayed on her face, but her eyes changed. Distant, glassy, almost offended. Don't say that, Danny. She's sitting right there. She gestured to the empty chair across from me. The plate in front of it was already served. Roast chicken, perfectly carved, mashed potatoes in neat scoops, gravy dripping down the edges. My throat went dry. Mom, Sarah died 20 years ago, you know that. Her lips twitched. For a second, her voice turned cold. She's been quiet lately, she whispered, but she's still here. She never left. I stared at her, waiting for her to laugh, waiting for her to say it was a joke. But she didn't. She just reached for the chair across from me and adjusted the napkin like a nervous hostess waiting for a guest who was running late. Something about the air shifted then. The ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway grew louder, slower, like each second was dragging its feet. I felt dizzy. Mom sat down opposite me and began cutting her food with precise, trembling movements. You always loved my chicken, she said. And Sarah, oh, she used to fight you for the drumstick, didn't she? Mom, please, I said softly. This isn't healthy. She's gone. You have to stop pretending. She stopped chewing. The knife in her hand scraped against the plate, a long metallic screech that made my skin crawl. Then, very quietly, she said, You shouldn't talk like that in front of her. You'll upset her again. Before I could respond, there was a sound. A soft tap, tap, tap coming from the hallway. We both froze. Sarah, Mom called gently. Come eat, sweetheart, your brother's here. I looked toward the dark hallway, my heart pounding. It was empty, but the tapping grew louder, closer. It wasn't footsteps, it was lighter, like the patter of bare feet on old wood. And then came the creak of the floorboard just beyond the doorway. My mother's face softened, her eyes lighting up with joy. There she is, she whispered. I turned back toward the hallway, and the chandelier flickered, just once. But in that single strobe of light, I saw something standing there. Small, thin, gone in the next blink. Mom, I said, my voice shaking, there's nothing there. Don't be cruel, she hissed suddenly, her voice sharp. She's trying. You never tried, Danny, you left us. Her eyes burned into mine, full of anger and tears. Then her gaze shifted past me again. It's okay, sweetheart, she whispered into the air. He didn't mean it. I heard it then, a giggle, small, high-pitched, echoing faintly through the room. My entire body went cold. The chandelier began to sway gently, its crystals clinking like wind chimes. The plate in front of the empty chair vibrated, just slightly, and then the fork lifted. Not high, just enough to scrape against the porcelain. Mom smiled through her tears. See, Danny, she missed you. I shoved my chair back, heart hammering. Stop it, stop pretending, Sarah's gone, she's... The chandelier went out. Darkness swallowed the room. I could still hear her voice, soft, trembling, angry. You always ruin everything. I stood frozen. Then, somewhere near the table came a whisper. Light, faint, and cold. Why did you leave me, Danny? I turned toward the sound. My eyes adjusted to the dim glow from the hallway, and I saw... movement. A small figure, pale, crouched near the table, its hands pressed flat against the floor. Mom, I breathed. But she was just smiling now, staring down at her plate. She's happy you came back, she murmured. Something tugged at my pant leg. I looked down. Nothing. Then I saw the small handprint. Greasy, wet, pressed into the fabric. That was it. I ran. I pushed past the chair, through the dark hallway and out the front door. Cold air hit my face like a slap. I didn't stop until I was halfway down the street, gasping for breath. When I finally looked back, the house was dark. The curtains were drawn. Only one light flickered faintly from Sarah's old room upstairs. I didn't go back. A week later, a neighbor called me, said she hadn't seen my mother for days. When the police broke in, they found her sitting at the table, 2 plates set in front of her. Hers was untouched. The other one was empty. The third chair was gone. And on the wall behind her, in childlike handwriting written over and over again in crayon, were the words, "He finally came home." A few days later, I got a letter with no return address. Inside was a single Polaroid. Me sitting at that dinner table. Mom across from me, smiling. And in the empty chair, a little girl with eyes too black to be human holding my hand under the table. On the back, written in my mother's handwriting, "Dinner's ready again tomorrow, sweetheart. Don't be late." I was 9 the first time my mother slipped and called me Tom. It was quiet, a late evening in our tiny kitchen. She was making macaroni and humming an old song I didn't recognize. She slid the bowl across the table, ruffled my hair, and said, "Eat up, Tom." I blinked. "It's Adam, Mom." She laughed nervously, eyes darting away. "Of course, Adam, you just look so much like your father sometimes." At 9, I shrugged it off. Parents were weird sometimes. But it didn't stop. By the time I was 10, she'd started using Tom more often. At first, it was when she was tired or distracted. But soon it was every good night, every note in my lunchbox, every scolding. "Tom, close the window." "Tom, don't talk back." "Tom, I'm doing this for you." I'd correct her, but she'd only smile a little too widely and say, "Don't tease me, honey. You always hated that name game." By 11, she'd stopped calling me Adam entirely. She began parting my hair differently, cutting it shorter, dressing me in collared shirts I hated. When I tried to wear my hoodie, she tore it out of my hands. "You never liked these when we were first together," she muttered. Why start now? I told myself she was just grieving. My father had left years ago. At least that's what she said. Some days she'd claim he was dead. Some days she'd say he'd gone off with another woman. Sometimes she'd look at me and whisper, "He's still here, really. You brought him back." At 12, I started noticing her watching me. Not just glancing, staring. Long, unblinking stares from across the room, her lips pressed together, eyes shimmering with something I couldn't name. Sometimes I'd wake up at night and see her silhouette in my doorway, just standing there, breathing softly. I tried to tell my teacher once. She called my mother in for a meeting. After that, I wasn't allowed back to school. "People fill your head with lies," Mom said. "We don't need them." The house became a world unto itself. Curtains drawn, locks on every door. Only 2 voices, mine and hers. Then the anniversary started. I didn't know it was an anniversary until she told me. I'd come home late from riding my bike. When I stepped inside, the house was dark, except for the dining room. Candles flickered on the table, wax pooling into long rivers. 2 plates, 2 glasses of wine, 1 napkin folded into a swan. My mother was waiting in a red dress. I'd never seen her wear it before. Her hair was pinned back with a gold clip, her lipstick smudged at the corners. She smiled at me with trembling lips. "Happy anniversary," she whispered. I stopped in the doorway. "Mom, what? Don't call me that tonight," she said softly. "You never called me that before." I froze. "What?" She gestured to the chair across from her. "Sit down. You'll ruin dinner if it gets cold." The smell of roast beef filled the room. It was my father's favorite. She'd never cooked it for me before. My name was gone from her eyes now. She wasn't seeing me. "You came back," she said. "I knew you would. You promised." I took a step back. "I'm not Dad." Her smile twitched. She tilted her head, studying me like a puzzle piece that wouldn't fit. "Of course you are. You look just like him. You've always looked just like him." She reached across the table and brushed my cheek with her cold fingers. "It's okay. We can start over. We can fix everything." I stumbled back. "Stop, you're scaring me." Something in her eyes cracked then. The softness drained out. Her voice lowered to a trembling hiss. "Don't you dare walk out again. Not after what you did." "What I did?" My voice was shaking. "You left me." Her hands clenched around the edge of the table so hard the wood creaked. "You left us for her." "I'm not Dad," I shouted. "I'm your son." Her breath came fast and shallow. "No, not anymore. You came back. I made sure." The lights flickered. The candles guttered. Somewhere in the house, a door slammed shut even though no windows were open. "Please," I whispered, "let me go." She stood suddenly, knocking her chair over. "I waited," she screamed. "I waited for you to come back, and you did. You came back as my son. You're mine again." Her voice echoed strangely, like the walls were swallowing it. I ran. She lunged, catching a fistful of my shirt, her nails digging into my skin. Her eyes were wet and wild. "Don't leave again. I'll lock the door this time. I'll keep you safe from her." I tore free and bolted upstairs, slamming my door and locking it. She pounded on it, sobbing, calling me by his name over and over. "Tom, Tommy, my love, don't do this, don't go back to her." Then her voice changed. Lower, slower, something crawling through it that wasn't her. "You belong to me." Silence fell after that. I didn't sleep. At dawn, the house was silent. I crept downstairs. The candles were burned down to puddles of wax. The plates were gone. Mom was sitting at the table, humming softly to herself, a photo album open in front of her. I stepped closer. Every picture of me had my father's name scrawled over it in marker, Tom. Every single one. In some, my face had been cut and pasted onto his body. When she looked up, she smiled faintly. "You're home," she said. "We can be happy now." That's when I saw the scissors in her hand. The blades were wet. I left. I ran out the door and never went back. The police found her 2 weeks later. She was sitting at that same table, wearing the red dress, wrists slit open, a framed photo beside her, half my face, half my father's taped together. The note on the table said, "Now we'll never be apart again." It's been 5 years. Sometimes in the mirror at night I see her standing just behind me, not calling me Adam, calling me Tom. And some nights when I'm too tired to fight it, I almost answer her back. When we first moved into the house, I told Claire it felt like it had history. Not the romantic kind, not the century-old charm the realtor talked about, but something heavier. It sat at the edge of town, past the old mill road, where the trees leaned close enough to scrape their branches across the roof during storms. The basement was the only part that made me hesitate. The realtor hadn't even wanted to show it, brushing it off with a nervous smile. "Nothing down there but storage," she'd said. That should have been my first warning. The steps creaked like brittle bones, each one slightly damp under my shoes. The light bulb above the stairwell flickered when I pulled the chain, a soft orange glow that barely reached the floor. The smell hit first. Wet cement, old rot, and something faintly sweet like spoiled milk. The air was thick, heavy, wrong. The walls were rough stone, patched with concrete in strange uneven sections. I remember running my hand across them, feeling the faint grooves of something that had been carved there once. long covered over. When I went back upstairs, Claire laughed. "You always find a reason to be dramatic about these things." But 3 nights later, I woke up to the sound of crying. It wasn't loud, more like a muffled sob, a baby's cry echoing through water. I sat up, straining to hear it again. The sound came from the vent near the bed, a low, rhythmic wail that rose and fell like someone trying not to be heard. Claire was still asleep. I wanted to believe it was a neighbor's baby, maybe a stray sound carried through the night air. But when I pressed my ear to the vent, the crying was right there, directly below us. The basement. I went down with a flashlight. Every step felt heavier than the last, like the air itself didn't want me there. The moment my foot touched the concrete floor, the crying stopped. Silence pressed in so hard it rang in my ears. I swept the light across the walls. Nothing. Just damp stains, cobwebs, and a stack of boxes we hadn't unpacked yet. But as I turned to leave, the beam caught something on the far wall. A faint chalk drawing. It looked like a circle smudged by time. Inside it, someone had scrawled words in uneven handwriting. Baby Grace. The letters were small, almost childlike, and beneath them was a date, May 12, 1979. I rubbed at the chalk. It smeared under my fingers like it had been drawn that very day. When I came back upstairs, I told Claire. She frowned, half asleep, and mumbled, "Probably kids. You said this place was old." I tried to believe her. But the crying came again the next night, and the next, always around 2:43 a.m. The third night it was louder, angrier. Claire woke up first. "James," she whispered, shaking me. "Do you hear that?" I did. But this time it wasn't coming from the vent. It was coming from underneath the floorboards. I grabbed the flashlight again. Claire begged me not to go down, but I couldn't ignore it. The sound was too real now. The sharp, wet sob of a newborn gasping for air. Halfway down the stairs, the crying stopped. The light above me flickered, then died. I froze in darkness, hearing only my heartbeat. I clicked the flashlight on. Its beam trembled as I swept it across the room. That's when I saw it. In the corner, where there'd been nothing before, stood an old wooden crib. Its paint was cracked and yellowed, one leg shorter than the rest. It rocked slightly, slow, rhythmic, like someone had just been standing there. I stepped closer, unable to stop myself. The crib creaked under my hand. Inside, under a folded white blanket, something twitched. I hesitated, then lifted the corner. Nothing. Just dirt, and hair, and tiny broken fingernails, hundreds of them arranged neatly in a little pile like a nest. I stumbled back, my flashlight flickered, and then behind me something whispered. Not a voice, only a breath, hot and damp, brushing the back of my neck. I spun around. Nothing. But the air was freezing now, my breath visible in the beam of the light. I ran upstairs, slammed the door, and locked it. Claire thought I'd lost my mind until the next night. She woke me around 3 a.m., eyes wide, pale. "She's crying again," she whispered. "The baby." This time I didn't move. I just lay there listening. The sound was back, but it wasn't coming from below. It was in the hallway. Claire started crying quietly beside me. "James, it sounds like she's in the nursery." We didn't have a nursery. I got up, heart hammering, and opened the door. The hallway was dark, but at the far end, near the old guest room, a faint light flickered. Warm and yellow, like a lamp had been turned on. "Stay here," I whispered. As I walked closer, the smell hit me again. That sweet, rotten milk scent. The door to the guest room was open just enough to see inside. It wasn't a guest room anymore. The walls were painted pink. Toys were scattered across the floor. A mobile hung from the ceiling, slowly spinning, the little wooden animals casting shadows across the room. And in the center, there it was again. The crib. But this time there was something inside it. I couldn't see clearly, but I saw a movement. Small, jerky, restless movement beneath the blanket. I took a step forward, my hand trembling. Then a voice spoke, low, cracked, right beside my ear. "She likes it when you rock her." I turned, but no one was there. The blanket in the crib shifted again, and a hand, pale and small, pushed out from under it. The fingers were grayish, shriveled, tipped with dirt. I didn't wait. I slammed the door shut and ran. The next morning, I found Claire in the basement. She didn't remember going down there. Her nightgown was torn, her feet bare and bleeding. On the wall, someone had redrawn the chalk circle, perfectly fresh. She looked at me and smiled. "I tucked her in," she said softly. She was cold. I nailed the basement door shut. For weeks, it stayed quiet. Then one night, while I was half asleep, I heard the faint squeak of wood. The sound of a rocking crib. I went downstairs, careful not to make a sound. The nails I'd hammered into the door lay scattered on the floor. The door stood open. And down there, in the flickering glow of a single light bulb, was Claire, rocking the crib, humming softly to the baby that wasn't there. When she looked up at me, her eyes were glassy, unfocused. "Shh," she whispered. "You'll wake her." I backed away slowly. That was the last night I ever stepped foot in that house. A month later, the police called. The new family had filed a report. Strange noises, missing objects, cold spots. But the thing that made me hang up was the last thing the officer said. They found a name carved into the headboard of the crib. He paused. "Baby Grace, May 12, 1979. When my mother died, I didn't cry at the funeral. Everyone thought I was cold, detached. But the truth is, I didn't believe she was gone. Not really. Even as I stood by her coffin, staring down at her still powdered face, I could swear I saw her eyelids flutter, just once, as if she were pretending to sleep. For weeks after, I tried to stay away from the house, that creaking old thing she'd refused to leave after my father vanished. I sold most of her belongings through an estate agent, boxed up the rest, and told myself I'd never step foot in there again. But 6 months later, I got a call. A neighbor said the lights had been turning on at night, curtains moving when no one was there. They swore they saw someone standing at the upstairs window. I told myself it was squatters. I should have left it at that. But guilt is a heavy, whispering thing. It eats at you when the house calls your name. So I went back. The first thing that hit me was the smell. The place always carried a faint sweetness, lavender perfume mixed with dust. But now it smelled darker, heavier, like old flowers rotting in stagnant water. The living room was just as she'd left it, neat, tidy, untouched. Except for one thing, a mirror, massive, ornate, framed in black oak carved with strange floral patterns that didn't quite look like flowers. It stood against the far wall where her favorite painting used to hang. I didn't remember her ever owning it. It was covered with a heavy black sheet, the kind used in mourning. I should have left it alone, but something about it called to me. When I pulled the sheet down, a smell of cold metal and something burnt escaped into the air. The glass was spotless, no dust, no age, but the reflection felt wrong. The room behind me looked darker. The furniture was the same, yet it felt off. Like I was staring into a version of the house that wasn't mine. And for a split second I saw movement, a shadow, a figure crossing the hallway behind me in the reflection. When I turned around, there was no one there. I laughed it off, muttering something about bad lighting, and covered the mirror again. But the next night, the sheet was gone. It lay crumpled on the floor, as if someone had ripped it off from the inside. That's when the tapping began. Every night around 2:30 a.m., soft taps would echo through the house. like fingernails brushing glass, always rhythmic, always coming from the living room. I tried to ignore it until the night it called my name. Daniel. It was my mother's voice, soft, sweet, soothing. I froze in bed, every muscle locking in place. Come downstairs, darling, I need to see you. I told myself I was dreaming, but the voice came again, closer this time. Daniel, come say goodnight. When I finally found the courage to look, my reflection in the dresser mirror wasn't moving. I grabbed a flashlight and crept downstairs. The living room was ice cold. My breath clouded the air. The mirror stood uncovered, gleaming faintly in the dark. And there she was, my mother, standing inside the reflection, smiling at me. She looked younger, softer. The way she looked before the house changed her. Before Dad disappeared. Her lips moved, but I didn't hear her voice in the air. I heard it in my head. You shouldn't have stayed away so long. I stumbled back, flashlight shaking in my hand. You're not real. She tilted her head, her eyes wet and shining. Of course I am. You see me, don't you? You always were my favorite boy. I tried to leave, but something inside me couldn't move. My legs locked in place. Come closer, she said. I've been so lonely. Her tone cracked on the last word, halfway between love and hunger. When I finally tore my gaze away, the room behind me looked empty. But in the reflection, everything was alive. The wallpaper was different, deep red instead of cream. Candles flickered across the mantel, and behind her stood my father. His face was gray, his eyes hollow, his mouth hung open as if mid-scream. Mom, I whispered, what did you do? She smiled, and slow, too wide. I kept him here with me like you asked. I never... Shh. She pressed a finger to her lips. Don't lie to me, Daniel. I know what you wished for. You said you didn't want us to ever be apart. My reflection stepped closer to the mirror. I didn't. He was moving on his own. Perfect, except for the way his smile didn't reach his eyes. Come home, darling, Mom whispered. The mirror's surface began to ripple, the glass turning liquid, swirling with shadows and faint outlines of faces. Hands, small, bony hands, began pressing against the inside of the glass from behind her. Mom, stop! But her voice only grew gentler. It's not so bad here, it's quiet. No pain. Just us. The hands multiplied, covering the surface, pressing, clawing, smearing it with something dark. I turned to run, but the reflection stayed behind, watching me, smiling. Then slowly he raised a hand and waved goodbye, and when I looked again, there was nothing left in the mirror but my mother's face, whispering through the cracks in the glass. I sold the house a week later, but mirrors have followed me ever since. Hotel mirrors, store windows, even my phone screen. Sometimes I catch a glimpse of her standing just behind me, smiling softly. Last night I woke up to the sound of that familiar tapping, and written on the inside of my bathroom mirror in fog were 5 words. You came home after all. If you made it this far, thank you for spending your night with us. If these stories gave you chills, there's plenty more waiting. Don't forget to subscribe to Night Fear Stories for new terrifying tales every single night. Sleep well, if you can.